Holy Mother God in heaven, Jesus, Mother Mary of God, whom I adore.
Okay. Recording in progress.
Good morning, everybody. Good afternoon, good evening. Hi, people. Hello, Katerina. Hello, Anna. Caroline, Wolfgang, everybody. Okay, people. Here we are, here in Kathmandu. Some people. There we go. All right. So we think we're here together to listen, think about, contemplate, analyze, internalize this information. As advice, it is advice. If it's not advice, if it can't be put into practice, it's useless. It's going to be practical. And what it is advice from the Buddha, according to his view of the universe, his own personal experiential findings about how the world exists, about what happiness is and what suffering is, and how to stop suffering and how to get happiness. I mean, a very simple way of putting one approach to what the Buddhist path is. It's that. That's the first part, the wisdom wing. And then you've got the compassion wing. A bird needs two wings, which is on the basis of that wisdom that you get as a result of sorting yourself out. You're now able to help others because you realize we're all in the same boat. And it will be unbearable not to help others because now you know how. You've done it for yourself. So this is the advice, and it's up to us whether we take it or not. It is advice, but you can decide to take it. You're the boss, not Buddha. And we can just sing a little prayer that expresses this idea. The first two lines of the prayer, for those of us who already figure we're Buddhists, it's reiterating our reliance on the Buddha and his teachings. And the second two lines are this altruistic motivation, this reason for listening to help ourselves develop our marvelous potential so we can help others.
Can everybody hear?
Yeah, we had a mic. There's a mic. Is it on? It is on, isn't it, Sushil? Can you hear me out there? You can hear me. And you can hear me online? Okay, sorry, a bit closer if you like. Okay, all right.
That's good.
You can hear me? Yes? Okay.
No, you can hear.
But it's quite, yeah, but whether it's because of the microphone, I don't know. Okay, we'll see. Okay, so I'll sing this little prayer. Sangye charang soke chognam la janchu badu dagni kyapsuchi dagi chunyen gi personam ki drola penche sangye drupa shog sangye charang soke chognam la janchu badu dagni kyapsuchi dagi chunyen gi personam ki drola penche sangye drupa shog sangye charang soke chognam la janchu badu dagni kyapsuchi Dagi chunyen gi personam ki drola penche sangye drupa shog. So, our main point this weekend is the Buddha's view of how we are who we are and how we can become what we will become, which is this law of karma. If we're Christians and Muslims, we believe there's a creator who runs the show, and if we're materialists, we're not quite sure yet, but we've got some views in the materialist world with respect. And then here we've got the Buddha's view. And the fundamental difference, the point that's really quite crucial that to understand it more than just superficially, is the Buddha's fundamentally different view from the other religious philosophical views that posit a boss, a creator who runs the show, who punishes and rewards, who is to be pleased and not to be displeased, and I'm not being rude. This is not the point here. The Buddha's point is we basically, this process of karma is this process of whatever we think and do and say is the process that produces the person we become. We are the creators of ourselves is the simplest way to put it. Not any kind of magic wand sense, but in an evolutionary sense. And I think I say this purposely, but again, always, in one sense, we utterly understand when it comes to producing a musician, producing a cook, producing a carpenter. We know we are the ones who do the work. We know it is we who have to become the carpenter. And how do you do that? You listen to the theories and you put them into practice and you perfect them. So you literally turn yourself from a non-carpenter to a carpenter. You turn yourself into a musician. This is not surprising to us. This is really the meaning of karma, this cause and effect. And we all know very well, you need a piano, you need a good piano teacher, you need a good composer, but we know the main player, the main cause of your becoming a musician is not the piano, is not the teacher, is not the composer. It's you. We kind of know this, but we don't join the dots when it comes to how do you produce a happy person and how do you produce a suffering person. We have a whole different set of rules, or we don't have rules. We're just confused. And so basically the way we think about becoming a happy person or a suffering person, we think the external events are the main cause. It's really quite a simple comparison, and it's a revelation if we can hear it. We know when it comes to becoming a musician, every thought counts. But when it comes to being a happy person or a suffering person, we think, oh, I can think what I like. I can do what I like, we think. Well, this dualistic idea that somehow it's the external events that produce me. Happiness is something you get from the outside. Suffering is something you get from the outside. And we don't even think our own mind plays much role at all. I mean, it's really quite schizophrenic if you think about it that way. I mean, really it is. It's quite fascinating. We're not surprised that we have to turn ourselves into a musician. We are the ones who have to study deeply. We take every tiny theory very seriously. We have to internalize those theories. We have to compare what we think in relation to the theories out there. We have no problem with following Bach. We have no problem with following an architect teacher. We don't think it's awful. We don't think it's giving up our own personality. We want to become like that person. So we follow what they did so we can become our own musician, our own architect, and we do it. We know this. And when it comes to becoming a happy person and a suffering person, it's very fascinating. As Lama Zopa Rinpoche says, it sounds very shocking. The vast majority of all human beings on the planet have absolutely no idea that what goes on in their mind plays any role at all in turning them into the person they become. Think about that. What it means is we think it's all out there. We think it's all out there. The events, the external things, they're the source of happiness and they're the source of suffering. Not for the Buddha. He agrees with the scientific view that you're the one who turns yourself into whoever you become. So that's all it is here. Buddha's advice is that if you look into your mind and you transform your mind into the mind of a happy person, into the mind of a non-suffering person, that's the job you're doing. It's really it's not surprising, but it is surprising if we think of it this way, So then if that's the point, what is the cause of happiness? I mean, the causes of becoming a musician are you follow Bach's theories. You hear the beautiful music, you want to become like that. So you listen to his theories, you internalize them and you practice them. Same with everything. So what is it here? What are the theories here? Well, Buddha's theory is, guess what? There are certain thoughts that are neurotic, deluded, misconceptions, that if they determine what you do and think, do and say, you're going to turn yourself into a very miserable, unhappy person now and in the future. They're called attachment and anger and jealousy and low self-esteem and arrogance and pride and depression and anxiety. We know these words intimately. He's suggesting, from his view, that these are distorted distorted states of mind that can only cause suffering, that they happen to be totally I-based, and they have to be rooted in fear. Their nature, their energy, their flavor is fear. And the key thing about them, which is quite hard to see, is that they're misconceptions. They're all rooted in being conceptual stories, and that they're misconceptions. They cause us to not be in sync with how things exist. This is what we have to look at, you know. And then there are other states of mind that we all are familiar with: love, kindness, compassion, forgiveness, generosity, all the rest. These are relatively valid conceptual stories. These are valid because they're related to reality. They're related to interdependence. And they're the source of our happiness. This is the Buddha's approach. How to get happy, how to stop suffering, how to turn yourself into a happy, disciplined, fulfilled, content human being. Simply speaking. Not to mention turning yourself into something more radical called a Buddha. Just an extension of being a good human being, really. So it's really not complicated. We hear it in a distorted kind of way, you know. So the law of karma is just is Buddha's explanation, is Buddha's observation of this law, that whatever we think and do and say is what produces the person we become. That's all. So that means we have to, the first level, which we talked about yesterday, is learning, you know, to control, abiding by the laws of karma, as they say. You want to learn to grow a garden, you abide by the laws of botany, you know, and you'll get the results slowly, slowly. But here the laws of karma, these natural laws like botany, like gravity, no one made it up. Buddha's observed it. That's his observation of how things go, how things work. And he says we can learn that law and then abide by it if we choose to. You take it with your working hypothesis. So from this perspective, what you're trying to do is transform the energy of your body, your speech, and then eventually your mind. First, you control the body and speech because they're the servants of the mind. And given Buddha's analysis, that we're driven by these neuroses. Even if we're relatively nice people on this planet, we still can see we're overwhelmed by neediness, emotional neediness, attachment, anger, depression, anxiety, jealousy, so on and so forth. We recognize them. We're familiar with them. We may be not as bad as other people. We can see the suffering that other people have of these. We can recognize them. But he says, well, honey child, they're the source of your pain. So the first step is at least don't act them out with your body and speech by harming others. If we look at the world, we can see the harm that does. But the crucial point for the Buddha is, as we discussed yesterday, the first level of practice is you're the beneficiary. An action that harms another is labeled a negative action, but by your doing it, you produce that kind of person and you produce that kind of result for yourself. So by killing, for example, you will produce a type of suffering rebirth in the future. And then also you'll produce the tendency to keep killing, which is hardly rocket science. You keep practicing something, you get better at it. You'll produce the result of because we are social beings. We live in relation to others and we create a karmic connection with them. So by harming others, you're going to meet them in the future and we'll be harmed by them. Karma is kind of personal, which is a surprise to us. We think life is random. So killing, for example, will produce a type of suffering rebirth. And within any kind of rebirth you have, even a human one, which is the fruit of non-killing, you'll have a tendency to kill. I mean, look at the human planet. 95% of humans kill something. It's a tendency in the mind. If you kill, you'll have the result called the experiences similar to the cause. Others do it to you. And fourth, you'll have the environmental result, because even what we do and say and think in the long term impacts upon the physical universe and it turns it into the universe that we experience. So the entire universe, actually, for the Buddha, is the product of the actions of body, speech, and mind of the billions of inhabitants of the universe. That's the Buddha's view. That's quite a shocking concept, quite unusual. Not used to thinking this at all. So if we choose to take this on board as our basis for life, And our very first level is you would learn to, at least attempt to cease harming others at the grossest level. At least don't kill, at least don't take the ungiven, at least don't jump on the wrong partner. Because why? Because these actions harm others. And what are they doing to you? Because they're driven by delusions. They're going to program you with these tendencies and these results. You don't want that. And then we're going to watch our speech, which is us humans. We're pretty good at that. We say words that aren't true. So he suggests we don't lie. We say words that are harsh, abusing people. We say words that are just meaningless, blah. And we say words behind backs that create incredible disharmony. So we might not run around killing and stealing from too many people, but look at our speech, We clever humans with our clever speech. We do so much harm. So these are 7 little don'ts that Buddha would suggest as a starting point, as the basis of your practice of turning yourself into a relatively happy person, a fulfilled, content person. Incidentally, others will be pleased because you'll leave them in peace, but you are the main beneficiary. This is the point behind this level of teachings. And then he starts, and then he also gets us in this little list of 10 things. He gets us to sort of begin to at least start working on the mind. As we discussed briefly yesterday, we touched on it, the Buddhist model of the mind. You've got the neurotic states of mind. You've got the valid, virtuous states of mind. And you have this third category that I like to call the mechanics: concentration, good memory, discrimination, a bunch of these, that enable us to function, whether we're a maniac or a murderer or a meditator. So this last of these little 10 list of 10 suggestions that Buddha makes, 10 little don'ts. It's like, at least he suggests we refrain from the heaviest level of these 3 main delusions. Buddhism refers to them as the 3 poisons, these 3 toxic emotions that are the basis of all the others. It's a very kind of hierarchical relationship in the Buddhist view of these different states of mind. They're just kind of random emotions. I mean, in Buddhism, often you'll hear about how Buddha would suggest there are 84,000 different neurotic states of mind. And as Ling Rinpoche says, 21,000 are rooted in the main delusion called ignorance. 21,000 are rooted in attachment. 21,000 are rooted in anger. And the fourth 21,000 are rooted in all 3. So it's a very coherent kind of approach to the mind, And then there are 84,000 antidotes to these. So these 3 poisons Buddha talks about. So at least in this little list of 10 actions to start as our basis for practice, we at least refrain from the heaviest level of attachment, which is this really, we can see it in the world, the mind of a junkie, basically. The mind of a junkie, whether it's video games, food, sex, money, you name it, total addiction mind, unable to stop thinking and wanting, craving desperately. It's quite a painful state of mind. At least begin to harness that. At least then begin to harness the heavy duty level of anger, which is where you can't let go of it and you even want the people to suffer. Look at the world, Malice, heavy duty anger. At least attempt to calm our minds down from the heaviest levels of an expression of the root delusion, this ignorance, this maripa, this primordial misconception of a sense of self. But a grosser aspect of that is this very narrow-minded, fundamentalist kind of mind. Fundamental is a great word, very narrow. Fixed, I'm right, you're wrong, no space. There's no feeling of interdependence, rigid, concrete, fundamentalist, very deeply ignorant kind of mind, At least refrain from these, attempt to become familiar with our minds. So at the same level of practice, before we even get to the next level, where we really become our own therapist, as Lama Yeshe would put it. As we mentioned briefly yesterday, once you say a person would commit to becoming a Buddhist, then at the same time, usually you would then take the 5 layperson's vows. Buddha loves his vows. There are 3 levels of vows according to 3 levels of practice. The very first level are known as the vows of individual liberation. They enable you to achieve your liberation from suffering and its causes. So those that a layperson would take would be the 5. A monk and nuns take same level, but other vows, same level. And these are kind of very strict, no nonsense, quite disciplined. Don't kill, don't steal, don't jump on the wrong partner, don't lie, and don't. The 5th one would be intoxicants. You don't have intoxicants. So when one takes these, you can take the 4 or 5 or 3 or whatever. And I mentioned briefly yesterday, just psychologically, the power of vows. And basically, as Lama Zopa says, you really can't get ahead of the game without them. The power is intense, psychologically, the benefit. And we understand that, if we appreciate that, we want to have these as our basis for our lives, you know. The next level of vows is related to the compassion wing, how to cultivate how to be of benefit to others. So the energy behind the very first set of vows, this first level of practice, is to protect us from creating our own suffering, to protect ourselves. There's no wriggle room. You're just very clear, very disciplined, very strict for your own benefit. The next level are more expansive because the assumption being that you've now controlled your body, speech, and mind to some degree. You've gained some level of equanimity and stability mentally and are more content and fulfilled in yourself. And now you start to realize we're all in the same boat. And you look out, you know, they're my God, the sentient beings, look at them, you know. So now these lot of vows, the Bodhisattva vows, they still don't do this and don't do that. They're guidelines for behavior. But the emphasis of these is on what's best for the other. What's best for the other person. And the third level of practice, the most advanced level of vows are those from the Vajrayana. The most advanced level of practice psychologically. So the other aspect of abiding by the laws of karma, using the laws of karma as your basis for your life, and apart from living in vows, which is said to be very powerful, like I said yesterday, the other practice to do, as Lama Zopa says, we're insane not to do it. And it's called purification. You'll hear a lot if you read Buddhist teachings. There are practices that enable you to create merit, that's how they say it, and there are practices that enable you to purify. Well, I mean, again, we might use those concepts in our daily life, but basically all practices have both aspects, really. But there's an emphasis on those that are called help you purify your mind, and there are some that emphasize creating. So really, it's like the purification is like pulling out the weeds, and the merit is like growing the flowers. Think of it like that. Simple way to put it. So given that our mind is happening all the time, and given that every millisecond we're thinking and doing and saying something, and therefore given that we're dropping seeds into our various bank vaults, and given that we're not out of samsara yet, that we haven't realized emptiness, let's say, or don't even have much renunciation, not to mention compassion or wisdom, given that, then even if being a fairly relatively nice person, we're still dropping negative seeds into our mind. And it's not to make us depressed or feel guilty. It's just this, according to this analysis, it's how it is. It takes us time to look at it, you know. So then we need to clean up our act at the end of the day, do some weeding done. Makes sense. So this purification practice, again, it seems so important to hear it in psychological terms. We say psychology and we take it seriously. We say spiritual, it's kind of about wishy-washy, you know. But the Buddha's deal is the mind. His deal is the mind. He doesn't talk about a separate piece called a soul, as we discussed yesterday. The mind, consciousness. The grosser level, your thoughts, your feelings, your emotions, unconscious, subconscious, instinct, intuition, this entire spectrum of your inner being. That's your mind, your consciousness, the main player in your happiness and suffering. So given that we're sowing these countless seeds every day, we want to kind of get ahead of the game, clean up our act. So the process of creating karma is psychological, is mental, utilizing also your body and speech. Well, in the process of purifying karma, of putting atomic bombs under these tendencies, This is a powerful component. So living in vows and purifying every day, like I said, these are very delicious, quite powerful psychological practices that are the basis of your daily practice as a Buddhist, if you choose. So purification, it's expressed in different ways, and there's different order of these 4 steps. They refer to them as the 4 powers or the 4 opponent powers. They talk like that. You can hear the meaning of the words. And I like this order, and as often as they use in the text the analogy of if you've eaten poison. Obviously, if you've got the tendency to get diabetes, and you just discovered you ate some sugar, the first one is called regret. So it'd be very logical that the response you'd have was, "Oh my God, what a fool! I can't believe myself. I ate some sugar. Quick, what can I do about it?" This is the first step. But this is a minefield for us because we have this view of guilt. We have the view of psychological, spiritual philosophy is kind of guilt, it's blame, punishment, reward. We kind of have a very heavy view of it. We can't hear it properly. So if someone says you've eaten sugar and you don't want diabetes, you don't get guilty and overwhelmed. "Oh my God, I'm a bad person. I ate sugar." And every day you're getting sicker and sicker, beating yourself up for having eaten sugar, because you know that the first instinct is to recognize you did it, and the next millisecond, quick, how can I fix it? It's really obvious. It's really obvious. If you're playing the piano and you play a wrong note in your practice, the first step is, quick, I better fix it. You don't sit there beating yourself mercilessly because you played the wrong note, which is, well, we do this. We take one thing we do wrong and we paint the whole of ourselves with it. And so one time, so regret is a very specific view that really is quite simple, but because we have this tendency to have guilt, and here spiritual as kind of like punishment, we hear it, we don't hear it properly. I mean, even a friend of mine who's a teacher, when we were discussing purification, he thought about it as saying to himself, "I shouldn't have done this, and I shouldn't have done that." It's utterly meaningless. Of course you shouldn't have, but you did. So what are you going to do about it? That's the next step, But we get fixated on shouldn't have, and I'm bad. I mean, that's a very strong addiction for all of us. We run to it very quickly. And basically guilt is anger, and you're the object. So if you did something wrong, I'll go, "You did this and you did that and you did this," and I'll conclude you are a bad person. Well, that's exactly what guilt is. I did this and I did that and I did this and I am a bad person. So even that statement itself, we could analyze very carefully. It's really quite absurd. Like I said, we take one action and we paint the whole of ourselves with that. And this is exactly how we live our lives with other people. Look at it. And this is again, we understand the delusions. This is their main function. They exaggerate, they embellish, they distort. So one person does one negative action. Anger arises in your mind that over-exaggerates their badness, over-exaggerates their badness. We do this automatically. This is a profound thing where we can really see it and then learn to know how to change it, This is when we start to work on our minds, not just our body and speech. So guilt is such a heavy-duty one. We also have a thing called low self-esteem, and these are very kind of connected. But let's analyze this for a second. It seems very similar, but I think there's I need a drink. There are many delusions, and we know the words very intimately. We mightn't use them in modern psychology, but this is the Buddhist psychological model. These words have been around for centuries. If these delusions exaggerate, so we have to see which each one exaggerates. So attachment, this primordial energy that drives the others, really is underneath everything. It exaggerates. Is coming from dissatisfaction. I'm going to go to the mind a bit here. We'll get to purification in a minute. It's coming from this primordial energy of dissatisfaction. So then you have to ask yourself the question, why am I dissatisfied? Because of attachment. You see, attachment exaggerates the deliciousness of something. It's like you got $50, but you believe for so long it's 500. When you see it, it appears to you to be 500. So you build up all these expectations of getting $500 worth. You go out to spend your 500, and what are you going to get is 50's worth, and you'll be disappointed. There's nothing wrong with 50's worth, but you thought it was 500. So you're disappointed. That's what attachment is doing all the time. It over-exaggerates the deliciousness of a thing out there, and we totally believe that when I get it, it'll bring me certain levels of happiness, which it doesn't in fact do. So we're always disappointed. That's what dissatisfaction builds up as. We're born with this, the deep, some people much more severe levels of dissatisfaction. Never have enough. Whatever I do, not enough. What I get, not enough. How much you say you love me, it's not enough. And the deepest one we have is that I am not enough. I don't think I know anybody on the planet who doesn't like their body. When they look in the mirror, I mean, they talk about anorexics having, what's that term they use? What? It's always Greek or Latin for these fancy things. We've all got it. Everybody's got it. It's a question of degree. You get the most perfect person on the planet according to the world's view of beauty, like Marilyn Monroe, or let's say Audrey Hepburn. I remember reading about Audrey Hepburn. She didn't like her left big toe, or her right ear was the wrong shape. I don't know any person who doesn't criticize their body. When we look in a mirror, what we see is that word. What is it?
Dysmorphia.
Dysmorphia. We've all got dysmorphia. Some people just have it more severely. I'm not joking. Analyze. Ask anybody. Do your research. This is the way delusions work. And this particular one is dissatisfaction. So why you look in the mirror, you're not satisfied with what's there because you have some vague other view of what you should be. We're never quite able to articulate it, but analyze it. It's always referring to something. It should be more. It should be better. You know, this is the deepest disease of the result of having practiced attachment for countless lives, what it says. You know, it's the most painful state of mind. And it's automatic. Your mother doesn't teach you. But the tragedy is because it's so habitual, the view comes, I'm not enough. But it's so fascinating. We never stop and go, well, I wonder if that's right. We never question it. And this is the tragedy of the thoughts that arise in our own mind. Think about this. Thoughts seem to come from nowhere, don't they? You don't invite them. They seem to come. And the negative ones, the exaggerated ones, the distorted ones, we just, somehow I find it utterly fascinating, we just assume they are true about ourselves. Forget about the whole world. My mother used to say, you're your own worst enemy. I think it's exactly what Buddha's saying. And that's why, this is why the source of our pain, we hear it as kind of, I'm naughty because I'm self-obsessed. Don't feel guilty. It's the cause of why we suffer so badly. And the self-obsession is always negative. I don't know anybody who says, Robina, I can't stop thinking good thoughts all day about myself. I have never met a person like that. We all know what I'm talking about. So it's a function of attachment. It's the irony. Because attachment always thinks you're going to get more. You always get disappointed. So you build up that disappointment. You build up the dissatisfaction. It keeps getting worse and worse, you know. So this one of low self-esteem, I think it's also linked, this is kind of interesting, this one. I think it's also linked to a delusion called pride. Now, I think anybody I know would like to admit to being proud. Everybody admits to having low self-esteem to one degree or another. But I think they're the flip side of the same coin. So when we're walking around and what we're doing all the time is comparing with others. When you're dissatisfied in yourself, you're always looking out there. And then if, like say, you're always seeing people who are more happy than you or have more than you. So then we get really offended and hurt by it. Like we take it deeply personally. So I think that's the basis of, this is very embarrassing to have to admit to, because we want to be better. And then because we find someone, we think they're better, then I must be a creep. Now, if you there's another state of mind called humility, and we don't like that word because we think it means low self-esteem. No, the virtuous states of mind, they've got an energy of being content, love, delighting in someone else's happiness, compassion, wanting someone else not to suffer, kindness to another, affection. They're all linked to others. The delusions, we analyze them, are all isolated from others. Or we see others as a threat. We see them as bad or better or uglier or, and if they're better, we are offended by it. So we then put ourselves down, Now, arrogance is this assumption. Arrogance or pride exaggerates my good qualities. And as soon as I meet someone else who's better, then immediately becomes, well, I'm bad. So pride is an overinflation of your qualities, and low self-esteem is an underinflation, or whatever the word is, of your qualities. You exaggerate your badness. They're very, very linked. So you could argue if you didn't have pride, you wouldn't have low self-esteem. You'd be content with who you are. You'd be fairly content. And you'd be humble. So a humble person is not a low self-esteem person. Humility is a virtuous quality. It's spacious and content with who you are, and you're able to delight that somebody else is better than you. Show me how to do it. And you're happy. You're not threatened by it. And I think this one of pride and low self-esteem, if you suffer most in your life in terms of how you think other people see you, that's to do with pride and low self-esteem. Always so injured by other people, so pained by other people. Don't feel people appreciate you. Don't feel people see you. You don't think people hear you. So we kind of twist it and turn it against ourselves, But if we have humility, you'd also have self-confidence. You'd be content with who you are. The virtuous states of mind, are comfortable. They're connected to others. They're rooted in dependent arising. They're rooted in reality. They're not distorted. They're spacious. They're comfortable. The delusions are painful and kind of jagged, eye-based, painful states of mind, and they always distort. I think we recognize these. It's not the analysis we do in the West, that's for sure. So dissatisfaction is a very specific function of attachment. And low self-esteem, you could argue, is sort of like a cousin, But this is where the more we understand the Buddhist psychological model, the more we realize, and this is again a big deal. Our problem in our culture, because we're so addicted to our bodies, we believe this is me. That our trouble is we don't notice what is happening in our mind until it rises to the surface and affects our body, and we call it emotion. And that's the tip of the tip of the tip of the iceberg. We don't notice until our body experiences something. I think it's putting it that way, because we don't pay attention to what the hell is going on inside, deeper in our mind, which is the job we have to learn to do. That's Buddha's expertise. And when we start to do that, when you start to go beneath the emotional component, that's where you begin to hear the conceptual stories that you are speaking 1,000 thoughts a second. Because all the emotional ones, love, for example, is an emotion as well. And when you feel it strongly, viscerally, but when you analyze it, it's a thought that is delighting in the happiness of another. Compassion is seeing the suffering of another. But these emotions are the tip of the iceberg that are driven deeper down by conceptual stories. It's like a script that we are writing all the time. This is when we really learn to become our own therapist, as she puts it, when we hear the conceptual story. So, like I said yesterday about anger, when you see a person screaming, shouting, pained, tears coming out their mouth and their eyes, you see the physical expression of anger. But what's happening in the mind is, how dare you do that to me? I don't deserve it. The outrage of anger is that, isn't it? That's a story. That's a conceptual story. That's what's rooting. That's what's at the root of that emotion. The outrage that I have been hurt. and I don't deserve it. All the emotions, and our trouble is we give big deal to emotions, but we don't go deeper. And we wait till the emotion comes. And that for me is like, there's a dumb analogy, but it's a really powerful one. It's like you've never heard of car mechanics, ever. You've got a brand new car and you drive it and drive it and drive it. And what I'm meaning is never paying attention to what's going on. And then one day at 120 kilometers an hour, your wheels are falling off. Oh, my wheels are falling off. What shall I do? That's like people every day in class, they'll come, they'll say, I'm having a fight with my boyfriend. What will I do? Well, it's too late to ask what to do at 120 kilometers an hour. If you'd learned about mechanics and maintenance, you would have been listening to the wheels when they began to wobble, and then you would have them fixed, and you would never have your wheels falling off. Wheels don't fall off cars because we have maintenance, but we don't have maintenance of our mind. We maintain our bodies, our teeth, our nose, our everything. We don't have methods for maintaining our mind. In our psychological models, mostly we have, dramas. You go when the wheels are falling off. You go to your therapist and say, I'm beginning to see that I'm getting a bit upset about things, which is the beginning of anger. She'll tell you, I'm not interested in you. Go back home and wait till you want to kill your husband, then come back to me. So we even only wait till the emotion comes. We wait till the severe things come. We wait till the wheels fall off. That's just too late. You could argue well before nirvana, well before enlightenment, okay? If you began to know your mind like we're talking, if you began to control your body, to control your speech, to live in vows and to do some purification every day, and you began to become your own therapist and dig deeper beneath the emotional component, and you'd be familiar with your thoughts and feelings, your thoughts before they become feelings, even relatively in a daily life, you could argue you will never get depressed. You will never have anxiety attacks. You will never get angry. And I'm not being sarcastic, because you're dealing with your thoughts, which are what your emotions are underpinned by. You drill down deep and you hear all these conceptual stories. You hear the thought that attachment is. You hear the thought that jealousy is. You hear the thought of anger and arrogance and low self-esteem. You hear the thoughts. And then what do you do with thoughts? They're conceptual stories. You argue with them. They're not set in stone. We wait till it's too late. That's our tragedy. So we've got to hear the distinct story that each of these delusions is telling us. That's how we unpack them and slowly stop believing in them and arguing with them, being our own therapist, as Lama Yeshe would put it. This is what Buddhist practice actually is, day to day, supported by all your other practices. So delusions distort, they exaggerate. So back to the purification practice. These four opponent powers. There's ways of doing it where you can do it very extensively with your bells and your dorjis and your long prayers and your Sanskrit and your this and your that. Forget that. For me, it's so important to do it, to treat it like it is. It is psychology. And for me, it's like at the end of the day, you're being your own friend. You are talking to yourself because you purify yourself. You might do the practice, we'll go through it, where you visualize the Buddha sending nectar, blah, blah, blah. Buddha's not purifying you. You are. It's your mind. I see it very strongly as being my own friend. So regret is this first step. It's like, if using the analogy of poison, well, I did eat cake today, and I did eat sugar today, and I did do that, and I did do this. You have to acknowledge it. You own it very simply. You have to train yourself not to have that guilty response, which is very automatic. Because if you analyze guilt more deeply, like we've been brought up since we're born by mummies, mummy says this and daddy says this and God says this and they say that and the judge says this and the police say that and a vague they out there. We're full of all these shoulds and shouldn'ts, right? So guilt is like, even when you break a cup, I use the simplest example. You break a cup. The first instant, you're checking to see who saw you do it. Immediate, because you've internalized mummy, because mummy says you shouldn't break cups. So we're so used to all these shouldn'ts. And there's nothing wrong with shouldn'ts if we can take it intelligently, but we take it as little children. I'm going to get punished. straight away. And so you get guilty, which is angry. It's so automatic. We're programmed like this. And this gets us to another thing before we go on to the purification practice. I've got to go off again. This gets us really to the deepest attachment of all, more than sex and drugs and rock and roll, more than money, more than power. And this is what's rooted in this guilt, I think. It's part of this guilt. It's this we're tiny. This attachment is this craving, this emotional hunger to be seen in a good light by other people. In other words, to be liked by somebody. This is the thing about attachment. It's the main voice of ego, the root. It's the main voice in day-to-day life of this primordial misconception of a separate self. And so there's emotional hunger. You only have emotional hunger because you think you're not enough. This is obvious. It's the expression of not being enough. And so the only way so even though food and those things are very evident, this is a much more subtle one, much more pervasive, much deeper. And it's this constant craving to be seen in a good light, to be praised and to be liked, to be approved of. So we so deeply have this dissatisfaction and we don't know how to approve of ourselves. So we assume, as always, that it all comes from out there. So since we're tiny, we've been craving mummy, daddy, next door neighbors, auntie, uncle, grandma, grandpa, school teachers, children, friends, neighbors to approve of us. And we're watching like a hawk every second, checking to see how what I'm saying and doing is being received by the other person. And even the tiniest inkling of another person not liking what I said, we have a panic attack and we try to adjust our behavior to make them smile at us. This is how deep this attachment is. It's so primordial. I think until we realize emptiness, this one doesn't go. They all don't go really until then. It's the deepest suffering of the sense of a separate self. So in other words, attachment is the symptom of a deeply suffering person who has no sense of their worth, who thinks they are nothing, who never thinks they have enough, and when it's really chronic, who in fact loathes themselves. We are really familiar with this. This is all a function of this deep bottomless pit of attachment. And the deepest way it expresses ourselves is in relation to others. They say the yogis in the mountains who've given up everything are still thinking about what the people in the village are thinking about them. So we're having this conversation all day. We're talking to ourselves. We're having conversations with people. We're telling people what we think. What do you think? I mean, that's what loneliness is. Think of loneliness. I've got no one to talk to. You have got to ask yourself the question, what is it about your thoughts that are not valid until someone else hears them? That really is schizophrenic, but that's how we all are. We don't think our thoughts we think they're worthless until someone else hears them and smiles at me and approves of my thoughts. Then that's why we feel this terrible suffering we have of not being heard by others, not being seen by others. This is pointing to the depths of the suffering of this attachment. There's a lovely saying in the West, you've got to become your own person. This is exactly what Buddha's talking about. Learn to approve of ourselves, become who we are, and be content with that. That's what comes from giving up attachment, whether attachment to cake or sex or approval. Because attachment is this bottomless pit of constantly craving more to think that I'll get full from it. But all you do is get more craving, more schizophrenic, more separate, more lonely. I mean, this one drives most of us. We don't even think. When I first heard this, I thought, oh, these people are stupid. That's not true. I don't care what people think. It's a load of rubbish. It's the deepest delusion of all, the deepest attachment, more than sex and drugs, more than food, more than money. It's primordially deep inside us. So it makes us inauthentic. It makes us kind of constantly adjust our behavior in the hope that someone will smile at me and tell me that I must have done the right thing. Because we have no certainty that what I think and do myself are valid. I mean, it should be quite terrifying to us. That's how we are. So guilt is related to this one. Because as soon as you break the cup, you're waiting for mummy to attack you, criticize you. I'm a bad person. It's in reference to what we think other people expect of us. So regret, this is a wholesome attitude, like self-respectful. So it's accountable. It's grown up. Well, I did break the cup. It's okay. I broke the cup. I'm just giving you an example, simple example. So what will I do about it? I'll buy a new one, whatever. Or don't worry about it, Robina, break a second cup. It's only a cup. It doesn't matter. But this one, regret, is really what you're first trying to regret. Acknowledge the things, like you say, you've done today, said today, that have harmed others. This is the obvious first level. Like you kicked the dog and you cheated on your boyfriend, whatever. And then you think of certain actions you've done in this life, that have harmed others. And you acknowledge that you did. So where guilt comes in, where it makes a mistake, guilt exaggerates your badness. And then the other one is, like if you fight with your boyfriend, we're so caught up with the boyfriend and our attachment and our neediness, we can't distinguish his actions from my actions. So the major piece here is really tough, because we tend to think, well, I'm allowed to be angry because look how he treats me. So that's childish. We've got to own the anger. The anger is mine. What he does is what he does, and my anger is mine. So we have to learn to distinguish my part from his part, which is a really tough one in close relationships. Because ego defends its right. I'm allowed to be angry. Look what he does to me. I'm allowed to be jealous. Look at him. That's how we think, we defend our right to be these things. What we're trying to do here is see how they cause me pain. And this is enormous, because we don't believe I cause myself pain. I don't think my anger causes me pain. I think my boyfriend causes me pain. So it's a massive thinking we have to do to get to own our own tendencies, to own our delusions, and then to own responsibility for the actions that I do on the basis of those with my body and speech that cause harm to others. So it takes time to dig in, look. And the attitude of regret is compassion for yourself. It's the only way. We say that a lot in the West, self-compassion. This is self-compassion, observing the things that harm you, observing the things in yourself that cause harm to yourself. We don't mind taking responsibility for sugar, because it's the body. We don't like taking responsibility for anger or jealousy, because we keep defending our right to be it, as I said. So it takes courage to see they're the states of mind that cause you pain. And then on the basis of this, you do actions that harm others. So this first level is about the actions that harm others. And I often use the example, also in this life, you can look at the different things you've done. And if we've taken, and because 99% of what we've done in this life, we don't remember, we can logically deduce we've done plenty. So you acknowledge those actions. So I always think of the abortion I had when I was 23, right? Now, as a Buddhist, I considered that was a consciousness that went into my womb, and I decided I'd have an abortion, so on and so forth. So I take responsibility for it. But remembering, which is also part of where guilt plays a mistaken role. If you, like many women, have incredible guilt about having had an abortion, assuming you take the view that that's a consciousness that came into your womb, which of course is the Buddhist view. But no, they play a part too. We're in this together. There's no way in the world I could have aborted the fetus in my womb if that person in my womb hadn't created the cause to be aborted by me. There's no way. It's not possible. It's not possible. It's not possible. It's not possible. So you got to, guilt over exaggerates your role. I'm responsible for all of it. It's not just not true. It's a dependent arising. So it's really important that I take responsibility for my part of it, and then indeed have compassion for that person who came to my womb due to the fact that they created the cause to be killed by their own past killing of me. So then, it's like respectful. Guilt exaggerates, especially mothers. You exaggerate. You take all the responsibility for all the problems. It's exaggerating. It's distorted. It's not valid. It's dependent arising. We're all in this tennis match together, if you like. So I regret having done that due to my ignorance, harming a sentient being. I asked the doctors and nurses to abort the child, and the child didn't get aborted properly. They had to dig it out again. So a lot of suffering. I had to take my responsibility for that role, Not guilt. That's foolish. So regret is this first step, ownership. I did do it. Then you think, well, what can I do about it? Okay, I can't bring the fetus back to life. That's clear. But I can change the tendencies. And this is the thing. I want to change my habits. So the second step was, whom can I rely upon? Reliance, the second step. And that's kind of got two parts. So here, the analogy is, well, where's the doctor? Whom can I turn to? Where's my doctor? Well, that's the way, as a good analogy for our relationship with the Buddha, as a doctor, not a creator, not as a forgiver, not as a punisher, not as a boss, but as our doctor, whose methods I have decided I like. I've chosen that doctor. So that's the concept of refuge. You could sing a prayer there if you want, but I prefer just to be delighted I found a doctor. Kind of a sincere feeling. I'm delighted I found Buddha's methods. I like Buddha's methods. I like the Buddha. So that's a delight in having found someone to rely upon, whom I've chosen. So if you're going to do the typical practice we do in the Tibetan Buddhist tradition, where you'd visualize an aspect of the Buddha, you'd visualize Vajrasattva above your crown, if you're familiar with that. If not, don't worry. And then you do it, and that would be the first part. But the second part in the second step, reliance, it's where you now have compassion for those you've harmed. So the first step is like compassion for yourself. I regret having done that. I regret stealing, cheating, lying, killing the ants, the dog, the baby, whatever it might be. Why, Robina? Because I don't want the future suffering. This is the fundamental point again about karma. It's not egoistic, as Wolfgang's point yesterday. It's intelligence. Because what you do produces the person you become. And you've got to want to not produce an unhappy, suffering person. You've got to want to produce a happy person. That's fundamental starting point. It's like the world calls self-compassion. The first step, regret. Because I don't want the future suffering. Then whom can I turn to? You rely upon the Buddha, and then now you have compassion for those you've harmed. But you can't have that until you have it first for yourself. It's the way to say it. This regret one really takes time. We misunderstand it terribly. Because like I said yesterday, we misunderstand the karmic one as guilt and shame and blame and blah, 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 Self-respect. Like you've eaten sugar. It's self-respect. What a fool. I didn't realize it. I don't want the suffering results. What am I going to do about it? Turn to the Buddha, turn to the doctor, and apply the antidote. Immediately, you'd know that. And the idea of what can I do about it is rooted in the idea that I don't want the future suffering caused by eating the sugar, caused by the killing, caused by the stealing. Not punishment. You produce yourself. You don't want the suffering results. Of course, it takes time. It's not how we think. Got to really think it through intelligently, not guiltily. So the third step is the remedy. So here, and this is often referred to as the antidote. So obviously, if you acknowledge you kill, one antidote is in daily life you try and save lives. You try and help sick people. If you acknowledge lying, one antidote is to tell the truth. It's sort of obvious. But here is a particular framework in which we do this practice as a meditation. And the third step is where you do this visualizing. Well, this is where we get confused. We think, oh, just visualizing. What's that mean? Using your mind, just having a fantasy about a Buddha sending nectar and making a few Sanskrit words. It sounds like nonsense to us. But it's the mind. It's your mind. It's your mind. Everything your mind does is what produces you. So if your mind has sincere regret for the actions you've done because you're sick of suffering, that's a powerful concept. If your mind, has compassion for others, that's a powerful idea. If your mind imagines purifying, imagination is your mind. But we think imagination is nothing. This is our trouble in our culture. We think it's just nothing. It's got no meaning. But every thought counts for the Buddha. Every thought counts. So the more confidence I have as I'm imagining, visualizing, I'm doing the work mentally that I am purifying. That is what purifies. That is what changes your mind. Purification is your mind changing. It's not some magic. As Amrit says, purification is the power of your regret, the power of your reliance and your compassion, the power of this remedy, this visualization, your mind wanting to change your mind. And the power of the fourth step, the resolve to change. It's a totally psychological process, and it's you doing it to you. You are the one who does it. You are the one who purifies. As Lama Yeshe says, we create negativity with the mind, and we purify it by creating positivity with the mind. And of course, the point is for the Buddha, because karma, like everything, is a dependent arising, there's nothing you can't purify. And I worked with people in prison. It was very powerful because I was so moved by this concept. Because there you are, you've been a gangster, you've killed a couple of people, you're in prison for life, and you're a shit, you're a garbage dump person, and you're going to go to hell for eternity. What hope have you got? The ones who liked Buddhist practices were so encouraged by it. There's nothing in your mind, because your mind is infinitely impermanent, infinitely changeable. There's nothing you can't change in your mind. It's you who does the changing. It's you who does the purifying. You rely upon these techniques. You rely upon the Buddha. There's no question. But it's fundamentally starting point. It's your mind that does it. You're the boss. So that's very uplifting, because the trouble with guilt is it sets us in stone. I did this. I am bad. That's what destroys us. And it's very fixed and concrete. It's just not valid. It's not reasonable. It's not reality. And then, of course, we have this craving to be approved of by others. And if you're sitting there as a gangster in a prison and you're the worst person on the planet, then and you're craving to be approved of, well, give up on it. You're not going to get approved. You can go kill yourself. What else? That's why people die. People suffer so badly. Look at us. Look at the world. What do you think success means? By definition, success is not you being good at something, is you being seen to be good at something. I mean, we are really schizophrenic. We're so fragile in who we think we are. We've got to have other people approving of us. If I'm in a relationship with my boyfriend and he's all needy and grasping to have me approve of him, and I'm all needy and grasping for him to approve of me, we're both these demented, self-loathing people, and I'm happy that a self-loathing person says I'm nice. Why would I take him seriously? He's a creep anyway. And he doesn't think, I mean, hear my point. Out of control here, and I can't speak. I mean, it's kind of, we're demented, Well, I mean, if we're so needy, just any idiot will smile at us. They've got us. We're done, Oh, he smiled at me. I must be okay. I mean, we should be sorry for ourselves. So guilt is heavy duty one, heavy duty. I'm bad. I mean, I always think of driving the car on the freeway. And a car comes up behind you and glares at you or toots their horn. We have a panic attack. Excuse me, I don't even know the bloke. He's a stranger, and I'm having a freak out because he's tooting his horn at me. I mean, you hear my point, hear it clearly. We lose all common sense. A stranger has disapproved of me, and we can't cope.
Not in Nepal.
What happens in Nepal?
In Nepal, they look at you with wide open eyes like.
So they don't get mad at you.
They just cut you off and they just smash into you. I'm like, nothing wrong, nothing.
Oh, I see. Okay. So they don't get mad at you. I mean, you ride your motorcycle. That's different. Wow. Anyway, are we communicating? I'm raving on a bit as usual. Are we communicating here, please? Before I continue with the purification process, I need you to ask me some questions, please. Any old questions you like. Anything at all, please. I'd like that. Good morning, everybody. Any questions now? Come on. At 11 o'clock.
Well,
Any questions? Nothing? Yes, good. Talk to me.
I think it was lovely. No question.
It's what, darling? It's what?
I really like what you said.
Oh, good. Okay. That's what we want to say. Oh, okay. Well, good. If it's helpful, I'm happy. Who else has a question? Any point to make, please? Any point to make? You see, I mean, yeah. Any point to make? Nothing. Online? Yes, Christine, go talk to me.
Thank
Christine?
you so much. Thank you so much, Venerable.
Okay, darling.
My question is one of the intersection of forgiveness and karma. So my question is, I think oftentimes we consider forgiveness to be an emotion as opposed to an action. And can we talk about how having forgiveness for ourselves and forgiveness for others impacts our karma? Or does it impact our karma?
I'm trying to think about, it's a similar question to me about Wolfgang's one of what he said yesterday, the question about, what was it? Gratitude. I think, and I'm just trying to go back, looking into our culture, and I think the Christian teachings very much rooted in forgiveness, and forgiveness is a huge one, and it's a big word in our culture. It's a big word because why? Because God created me, and actually, what purification in Christianity is God forgiving me. That's what, I'm not being sarcastic. We've got to analyze this psychologically. It's powerful. If you do have a relationship with God, who is your creator, who created you, whom you revere, whom you wish to please, who will punish or reward you, I'm not complaining. So it's clear forgiveness is absolutely vital to have. So, of course, you bring that into your daily life. And when you badmouth your boyfriend, then you want him to forgive you. You can't wait to call him up and say, darling, I'm so sorry, please forgive me. And if he does, aren't you fortunate? But this is what's interesting. Let's say he doesn't forgive me. This is our problem, because we assume forgiveness. This is not coming, I'm going to get to your point eventually about forgiving yourself. But this one of forgiveness, because we take the Christian teaching, and I'm not criticizing it, please, that if God doesn't forgive me, I'm in serious trouble. And that's why we love God so much, because God will forgive me. And there's nothing wrong with that. It's powerful. And so if my boyfriend doesn't forgive me, our problem is then I'm not being approved of. That means I'm a creep. So we believe that I'm only valid if somebody forgives me. So it's the same one about wanting approval. It's up to me, and this is why forgiveness of yourself, this is why this purification process, based on the idea you produce yourself, that the first step of regret is acknowledging I did do these actions of harming others, which will create my future suffering. And you know what, Robina, I'm saying to myself, I don't want suffering. I am sick of suffering. I don't want more suffering. So I absolutely regret having done this from the depths of my heart. That's the attitude of regret, which, if you like, is like compassion for yourself. So then if you could argue, then forgiveness, there's no concept there of forgiving, but in a sense, you are forgiving yourself because you did something wrong. So, but we don't use that concept. It's another sort of psychological concept. Are we here? Are we communicating, people? Mm-hmm. So forgiveness has got a very big role, because it does assume that forgiveness is what fixes you. That's why, and I think we can misuse that in our daily life. Let's say, Wolfgang's my boyfriend, and I'm always fighting with him and being mean to him. And yet again at breakfast, I was bad-mouthing him. And then I'm on the way to work and I'm freaking out. This is how I can misuse forgiveness. I'm freaking out because I'm actually scared he's going to reject me. So I say, oh, please, Wolfgang, forgive me. And he says, Robina, I still love you. I kind of, in a way, feel, oh, phew, I got off the hook again. So if he's really being my friend, he should say, Robina, I'm happy to forgive you, but honey child, you've got to do something to change. If he just keeps forgiving me, I'll get off the hook. I will never change. And then one day he won't forgive me because it's too much for him. But if he says, I will forgive you, but you've got to make some decisions to stop bad-mouthing Robina. And that's really important point. That's why the fourth step in the purification process, you regret having badmouth Wolfgang because I'm sick of the suffering. Then I have compassion for Wolfgang. Then I do the practice and imagine purifying. And then I make a decision. I can't say I will never badmouth Wolfgang again because I'm so deeply habituated. But I might say before I go to sleep, I will not badmouth Wolfgang for 24 hours. And I bet you I'm going to keep it because I've made a decision. You've got to do the changing. Forgiveness is not enough. In our relationships, we can misuse it even. In other words, I'm dumping it on Wolfgang to make me feel better for bad-mouthing him. That's really wicked. That's really not appropriate, So that's what I want to say about forgiveness. So as far as forgiving yourself is concerned, if you have this view of karma, Christine, like I said, you acknowledge that whatever you do produces you. You recognize, I don't want future suffering. So of course the attitude immediately would be this attitude of self-respect. I deeply regret having done those actions because they're going to produce my future suffering. So if you want to call that forgiving yourself, you can do that, but I wouldn't use those words. I'd use another word. I'd say it's compassion for yourself. You with me, Christine?
Absolutely. That does make sense, Venerable. Thank you. One
Good
quick
one.
follow-up. One
Good.
quick follow-up question.
Go.
So replacing the word forgiveness with the word regret, then
Well, no, I'm not saying that exactly. I'm just saying that's the psychological approach here based on the view of karma. You can do what you like with that, but go on, go on.
so
I mean, we've got to
The-
forgive ourselves. Put it that way. If you're just talking to yourself, you've got to, because we do hate ourselves. We do blame ourselves. We do beat ourselves up. So you could argue it's a very sensible attitude to say, give yourself a break, Robina. You're just a human being. It's okay. That's forgiving yourself. Yes, there's nothing wrong with it. But I was just going through the analysis of what the regret psychologically is. It doesn't even use the idea of forgiveness. But I don't disagree that if that's what works for your mind, because we do hate ourselves. We do beat ourselves up. We do put ourselves down. We need to forgive ourselves using that concept. No argument.
so the regret,
your mind.
so the changing the behavior, changing the action for the future.
No, I don't quite know
Impact.
what those words mean, changing the behavior. The first step is you
So-
regret.
So using your example of bad mouthing. So
So the first step is you
can-
have to regret and acknowledge that you did bad mouth your boyfriend, and you have to regret it because you are sick of this habit in your own being. You're fed up with the pain it causes you, and you don't want the future pain. That's regret. Can you hear that?
absolutely. That
Next
was
step
great.
is I now have compassion for Wolfgang. Next step is I do some purification. And the fourth step, I make a decision to change. That's the most powerful one. You've got to change your behavior. I've got to decide. Do you see what I'm saying?
Absolutely. Thank you very much, Venerable.
Oh, darling. Who else, people? Yes, at the back there. Can I have the mic? Please.
Also question connected with forgiveness, but
Oh, where are we? Who's talking? Oh, you are. Good. Talk to me, darling. Yes.
Forgiveness towards
Bit louder, would you mind?
who harmed you. Let's say
Sorry.
Example.
Start again.
I'm angry with you and I break your cup intentionally.
Yeah.
And I rejoice.
That's right. Yes, then.
Can I negative?
Okay.
But let's say you're not attached to a cup and you were like, forgive me from the bottom of your heart.
Sure, that's easy. Then, so then where's the question?
The question is, will your attitude decrease the might result in karma?
Everything's interdependent. It has to play a role. Of course it does. And even just in daily life, because if I get so mad at you and never forgive you, then we'll become worse enemies, and I'll sue you, then I'll kill you. It can lead terrible things, even just in this life. So of course it is. But the real point is to have this clarity. There's me and there's you. And your business is yours and my business is mine. And if you are doing the purification and you do decide you regret having done that because you are sick of the suffering of this anger, because you're fed up with anger, and you decide then to have compassion, you'd have compassion for me, whatever, maybe I've harmed you, whatever, and you determine not to do it again. That's your concern with karma. That's your main concern. Whatever I do, however I respond, doesn't matter. But of course, it has to have a role. Everything has a role. Everything is interdependent. Everything plays a role. For example, if you use an example of, say, harming, you can kill an ant, but you can kill an ant sadistically, can't you? It's obvious the more harm the poor ant experiences is the heavier your karma. It's pretty clear, Do you understand? Do you understand? Okay. But still, no matter what I do about it, I might hate you till the cows come home. I might hate you and loathe you, want to kill you every day. That still has no impact. That still doesn't mean you can't completely clean up your act. Do you understand? You sure? Good, darling. The person behind you, please give her the mic. Yeah.
Hey, good work this time.
Have you ever had a personal experience where you have found compassion for somebody, but you still don't want to be around them? So say they've asked you for advice, you've given it to them lots of times, and they still have a lot of really toxic behaviors that they continue to bring up to you over and over and over.
That's right.
And it just wears you down.
That's right.
And you're like, I love you, but I really cannot be around.
That's
you
right. Well, we
anymore.
see that, of course. I mean, the point about compassion is we have to try and have compassion eventually as we're really advanced for everybody. And that includes the pedophiles, the murderers, the terrorists, the pythons, the snakes who want to eat you for breakfast. So clearly having compassion for a sentient being doesn't mean you have to hang around them. Pretty obvious. You use your common sense. So that's very common among families. It's very common. And that's where we are sort of, full of guilt and shame. Like I said, we have our darling mummy is neurotic and needy and always wants us to love her and never thinks that whatever you do, you can even feed her your blood every morning for breakfast. She still won't be satisfied because she's got this bottomless pit of neediness that feels you don't love her enough. We know people this way, and it is deeply. So if you're a bodhisattva and you can handle it, then fine. If you can't, you've got to keep distant to protect yourself. You've got to know where you're at. It's so clear.
Then you need to forgive yourself.
Well, no, I don't. I mean, you can use those words. I never used those words in my whole life. I don't know about that.
Okay, fair enough.
Why would you forgive yourself? What did you do wrong?
Well, there's something kind of in our psychology where it's like I should be tolerant of this person.
That doesn't mean you're not tolerant. No, I think you're getting.
Exactly.
No, let's explain more. Let's just look at it more clearly. Maybe do that. Okay. One is your mind and one is the other person. Two separate things. Let's say it's your mummy, your darling mummy, or whoever it might be, doesn't matter. And you can observe. So first you know your own mind and you see about attachment and you go, oh my God, look at her. Look at the bottomless pit of neediness. Look at her expectations. Look at her suffering, her pain, her hurt. And she's got her own history, her own story, her own suffering. And you can see it. And you try to give advice. And then the fact is she doesn't take your advice, so she comes again for more advice. So because we judge ourselves based on whether or not she gets better, you're assuming you did wrong because she doesn't respond. That's your attachment, honey child, because your attachment only wants a nice outcome. So that's not the criterion of your success. Your success is that you did your best, and there's no benefit in hanging around with this person if it drags you down. So you don't blame them. Because if you were a bodhisattva, you could handle them. So you have to know you're limited in your ability to handle them because you're still working on your own delusions. So you know what you can and can't do. And that's kind of called wisdom. And that can be the best compassion of all. So there's nothing to forgive yourself for. You did nothing wrong. It's not sensible to think you've got to keep going patting a python on the head. No, it'll eat you for breakfast. How stupid.
I love it.
You get my point?
I totally
Good,
agree.
darling. Good. Okay.
That's a good one.
Yes. Who else has a question? Yes, Manuela. No. Okay, who has a question? Yes, darling, talk to me.
I have one a little bit similar to that, but more so like in relationships, like when you are working on breaking these attachments that you have to certain scenarios that you then play out in relationships, like what's the best way to support that, but also not, become.
I think it'd be good as always give a good scenario. Just give a scenario. It's much easier. It's too general otherwise. Give a scenario. I mean, it doesn't have to be personal. No one knows who you're talking about. Don't worry about it.
No, I'm trying to think.
Okay. It's important.
Yeah, I guess if you're in a relationship and the person that you're in the relationship has a tendency to lie.
Okay, good. So go on.
And they're aware of this tendency.
Yeah.
And they're making these vows like I'll never lie again, and then they break these.
You mean they lie to you?
Yeah.
Okay, good. So what's the question? Good. What's the question?
So how do you, I guess, like support that compassionately, but also kind
What do you mean by support? What do you mean by that?
Like support their efforts in breaking this like.
Okay, so I think first of all, okay, I hear you. I think the very first point is this. You have to be clear that you want this relationship. You have to be clear that you want this relationship, and that means you're prepared to work with it. and that you know the person's faults, if you're not clear that you, whether it's at work or a love relationship, doesn't matter. You've got to have a clarity that this place is the right place for me to be at the moment. This is my learning right now. The job might be creepy, the colleagues might be awful, but I'm making a choice. I'm going to stay at this job because there's something I can get from it. If you feel that, then you'll be able to work with it because you're wise and sensible. Now, if it becomes intolerant, this is the point now, if it becomes something you can't deal with, then you leave. Finally, there's only two options. You stay or you leave. When it comes down, it's as brutal as that. You've got to first have this confidence that this is the right job, or you realize that obstacles are so enormous you can't handle it, so you go. But always humming and hawing and hoping and being disappointed, and then he's hoping he'll change, and then he gets up, he does it again, and then he get upset and he does it. You've got to have some clarity where you are in it first. Is the relationship worthwhile? You hear what I'm saying? Good. All right, darling. What else, people? Yes, good, darling. Talk. Yes.
Yeah.
Good. Talk to me.
So when I reflect on the situation when I got angry,
When say it again.
when I reflect on situations when I got angry,
Okay, good. Angry. All right.
and I try to analyze what happened in my mind,
Yes.
I often arrive at the point where the anger was a reaction.
The what?
The anger was a reaction to keep myself safe.
Okay. Can you give me a scenario, please?
I just arrived at this. I felt hurt.
Can you give me a scenario?
Somebody hurt me, and I got angry.
So what do you mean by hurt you? Just give an example. Simple example. Simple. Is it a stranger? Is it your mother? Is it your husband? Is it your baby? Because it all depends. There's a big difference in every one of those relationships. So you got to, that's why you got to, it's too general otherwise. I can't answer, I can't discuss it. Give me a simple scenario. I mean, if it's a rapist coming at you, then I'd suggest showing anger is a very intelligent response. If it's your baby, I'd say it's a wrong response. So it depends on which one it is, please. You've got to give me an example. Okay, thank you. Now we're getting somewhere. Okay, come on. Tell us. So then she's mean to you, is she?
That's how I perceive.
Okay, never mind. No, I mean, you know her a little bit. You know your sister, your darling sister. If she's being defensive and she stabs out at you with mean words or something, does she?
Yeah.
Okay, so then what's your response?
Anger.
And what do you mean by anger? What would you say?
Something I say, or my tone of voice, or
You'd respond to her. You'd respond to her angrily.
Yes.
Okay. So then now we have the scenario. What's your question?
My question is, when I look at that situation from the distance, try to take myself out of it, I think I was being hurt.
Yeah, because anger, absolutely, because anger is, okay, let's analyze what anger is, shall we? Anger is the response when our attachment doesn't get what it wants. This is the analysis. So attachment is this driving force in the bones of our being, this emotional hunger that's always only wanting everything to be lovely. It only wants the nice words, the nice sound, the nice taste. Are we communicating here? So this is the human condition according to the Buddha, and that is a very fragile state because it can't cope with problems. So obviously when the sister lashes out, the anger automatically arises because you've just been hurt and offended. Well, join the universe. Then the next question is it a valid thing to do or not? You have to decide that. Did you achieve anything? No, you just increased your own anger.
So my question is, how do I deal with that feeling of hurt?
That's what anger is.
Dissatisfaction.
No, it's not even dissatisfaction.
For me, it's hurt.
I know. That's exactly how it is. Anger, exactly. That's exactly right. People who are angry feel terribly hurt. That's exactly right. The injury is unbearable. And remember I said before, anger is, how dare you do that to me? I don't deserve it. That's the pain of anger. That's how it feels. Everybody who has anger has that. And so the Buddhist approach is you've got to analyze even that assumption. It's quite subtle. It's quite hard to do that. Or the other way to say it is, if you didn't have the emotional neediness to only hear nice words from your sister's mouth, if you didn't have this emotional hunger, in other words, if you didn't have attachment, which means you're more content in yourself, her words will be water off a duck's back. That's the analysis to do. This is the Buddhist analysis of the actual states of mind called attachment and aversion themselves. They're totally universal. Dogs and monkeys have them as well. And they're spontaneous because they're habituated to these tendencies. This is the Buddhist analysis. Are you with me? Can you hear it a little bit?
I'm hearing it.
Okay, good, darling. I'm very happy. So then this is where, for example, sometimes if like whether your example or your example, if it becomes too much, your mummy or your sister, then if you really can't handle because you know you don't want this pain and you don't want to develop these habits in yourself because you're sick of the bloody suffering, then you've got to keep away from your sister. Which of course is a nightmare in families because then all the criticism comes and oh my God, this, that, and this, that. So it's kind of difficult. It's a minefield in a family. You've got to know what you can handle. You've got to know your own tendencies. You've got to know your own mind, own them without guilt, and then know the things that trigger you. Like if you're an alcoholic, nobody would expect you to continue drinking alcohol. You've got to keep away from the alcohol to protect yourself. Same here. We don't have enough self-respect because then we get guilty. Oh, I should see my sister, blah, blah, blah. They get all caught up and all kind of ridiculous, you know. Got to be very clear about what we can and can't handle, as well as doing the analysis itself, you know. Do you understand? Yeah.
So should she feel bad about it? Getting angry?
What's some Sarah? She didn't ask that. I don't want to answer. She didn't ask it. Go on. Who else? Any other questions? Please. I think it's a good way to go. This is the stuff we have to talk about. Come on. I mentioned purification, but that's it. Now talk about. Keep talking. Keep talking. Come on. This is the stuff. This is the stuff of daily life, isn't it?
Very practical.
Yes, that's right.
Very good. Very good.
Go on.
We're going off to the experience. You said, I think yesterday when you were starting to talk about attachment, this attachment over exaggerates the deliciousness of something.
Mm-hmm.
And you started to talk about how that shows up in relationships.
What, honey?
You overemphasize the deliciousness of your boyfriend.
For example, or the cake or whatever it is.
And I was wondering how that I felt like I could learn something from that.
You felt what?
And I could learn something more about that way that attachment shows up, like you pedestalize this person and what kind of is the deeper tendency that's playing out
In yourself. Yeah, it's this lack, it's not feeling you're enough. It almost seems too shocking to hear this because we take relationships so seriously as the most normal thing on the planet. We take the idea that to have someone love us is the most important thing on the planet. We don't do the analysis, you know. Why would someone else's, you've got to ask the question about attachment in relation to people, for example, which really is, I mean, we call it a relationship, we call it sexual, but I think that's really the small part of it. I think it's the approval. When someone, you know, when you're feeling lonely and you don't think you're worthwhile and you're isolated, no one to talk to, no one to love me, I'm quiet, I've got nobody, the world is full of happy people, I'm the only person who's not happy. We feel all that, right? Then suddenly someone comes along and starts smiling at you. I mean, no wonder we faint with pleasure. It's like a miracle. It really is amazing. I mean, this is the thing you see when people are in love. They're shining like radiantly joyful because each of them is looking at the other like they're a saint or like a divine goddess. So it's the most heavenly experience on the universe to be seen as beautiful, which shows we don't think it ourselves. It proves it. It proves we think we're nothing unless someone smiles at me. This is the deepest disease we have, but we think it's glorious. I'm just talking, this because what it comes from, why I'm so joyful if I see a delicious chocolate cake, why attachment exaggerates the deliciousness of the chocolate cake, that's equal to the level of feeling I'm nothing. It's literally like that. So the more hungry you are, in other words, the more emotionally hungry you are, which is the energy of attachment in yourself. I haven't got enough. I am not enough. In fact, I'm nobody. The more hungrily you crave for the cake, certainly the person to smile at you. And then we exaggerate their beauty because they appear to us as totally divine. Everything about them is perfect. And then it brings all this massive control freak, expectation, and then the panic of losing, and then the jealousy. And then he looks at one other person once and you go kill yourself. I mean, look at all the results of all that, you know, it's so fragile. It's like a nightmare, absolute nightmare.
The moment when we don't fulfill that.
And that's right. And the massive expectation is, yes, that's their job to make me happy. It's their job to praise me, love me every second. Or in other words, it's their job to fulfill my attachment's needs 24 hours a day. It's a vampire, basically, attachment. Now, if you've got love, patience, kindness, forgiveness, and generosity in the mix as well, you'll be fine. Do you understand? But if you haven't, you're in trouble, babe. I tell you.
When you said about if you just keep eating the cake over and over and over, you become sick. If you do that with a person, just kind of like.
If what?
If you do that with a person, it's like,
Well, no, yeah, because the more you, it's like your mother, the unhappy mum, who no matter what you do for her, it's never enough. She wants you to do more. She wants you to stay there 24 hours a day. I remember meeting one woman she was like 60, her mother's like 90. And she was just so completely overwhelmed by the mother's attachment and of dissatisfaction. She'd even sleep in the same bed as her mother, you know, and still the mother wasn't happy. That's the suffering of attachment. So then if you... What? Yeah, I know that. Of course, that goes without saying. But I'm just saying the suffering of attachment. It never gets what it wants. So if you've got only attachment for your boyfriend and not much love and kindness, you're going to have anger when he doesn't do what you want, even if you think he's not doing what you want, even though he is, but you're never satisfied. You'll always find fault. You'll get angry. You'll get jealous, and you will go mad and either kill yourself or kill him. But if you've got virtue, then you have a reasonable relationship.
then you can turn that attachment into practice.
Well, you can learn to lessen the attachment, keep it simple. What else? Huh? Nothing? Yes. Speak to me.
Hi, how are you? My question is, why do we fall out of love with things that we?
What do we do? What do we?
Why do we fall out of love with stuff that we?
Oh, that's good. No, there's attachment, because attachment dies down. After the cake in the beginning, you can see how it looks divine and delicious, and there's a lot of excitement and anticipation, isn't there? Do you agree with that? Just the cake's the analogy, you know. And then after a while, it starts to fade, doesn't it? It doesn't start to, as you keep eating it, it starts to look less nice because you're starting to get full. Well, if there's only mainly attachment for somebody, the excitement has to calm down. It has to die down because it's over exaggerating. And you start becoming familiar, you're moving with the person. First of all, you go out, let's assume you like girls. I don't know, maybe you like cats, I wouldn't know, but never mind. We're very creative these days. Never mind, let's pretend it's the girls you like. So, you know, you go in the beginning when it's all the kind of the dance and you're trying to seduce each other, we all look perfect. You wear your best things, you clean your body nicely, and you wear perfume, and you make your face pretty, and you're both looking divine, you're dancing around each other, seducing like crazy. I remember, okay? Isn't it? And I'm watching for your approval, and you start to you look at me with dazzle eyes, I'm in complete joy. Then you're looking at me and I'm giving you dazzle eyes, and you're in joy. It's all amazing. It's amazing. And then we go home and we just kept it on this, and there's all excitement and anticipation for the next visit and the next one. And then we start to sleep together and we start to live together. And then I think because he adores me, I'm going to fart in the sheets instead of the toilet. I'm going to burp over my breakfast. And because you're a human being, you start to get a bit jaded because we're just so naive about attachment. We think, oh, he loves me, he's going to love everything I do now. But after a while, if your attachment's strong, you're going to start having aversion to me. I snore, I toss and turn at night, I'm mean to you. I mean, hear my point. I'm just talking not cynical, it's a reality if it's mainly attachment and aversion. Now, if there's genuine love and affection there, it'll be okay, because that'll outweigh the attachment. Even when I get fat and old and farty, it doesn't matter because you still love me. It's the virtues of the saving grace. If it's only the delusions, it cannot last. It just can't. Do you understand me? That's it. That's the answer. It's the virtues. I mean, we don't speak this way in modern psychology. We don't make the distinction between delusion and virtue, or non-virtue and virtue. It sounds so religious, but it's got a real validity when we understand the characteristics. The negative ones are neurotic, I-based, fear-based, dissatisfied, miserable, distressed, disturbed, ridiculous. And the virtues are spacious and clear, connected to others. They've got a good quality in them. They're the ones that are the saving grace, you know. You understand? Because attachment can't last. This is not realistic. It's a fantasy you've made up. You've exaggerated something. So the bubble has to burst, you know. And then, of course, we have all the other expectations. I remember I always quote this, and I quote Nicole Kidman. I love the woman. I'm not trying to give her away or anything, but I remember when she was with Tom Cruise. I always quote this. She was with Tom Cruise, and I read an interview in Vanity Fair like 25 years ago, whatever it was. And she said at the end, we will be together until we are 80. So what happens here is, because everything's divine and everything is gorgeous and the karma's ripening beautifully, and you've got these kids in your life, your family, and there's nothing wrong with happiness. Be happy if you've got happiness. Be happy if you've got a partner and a house, everything works beautifully. How amazing. But because attachment is getting what it wants, the terror is that it will end, and we can't bear the thought of it ending. So we project this other lie on top of it. We will be together until we're 80. It's completely a fantasy. And in fact is, Tom left her for Penelope Cruz or something. I remember in the article, I remember vividly, the next sentence she said was, and of course, if we won't be, I'll be devastated. And she was. The bubble burst, because attachment wants only to get the nice things. When you've got the nice things, there's an underlying horror that it won't last. So we have to project this lie of permanence onto it. And because, in other words, because it feels good now, we assume we'll be together till we're 80. It's a complete fantasy, a complete made-up story, because we know some things might last until you're 80, but many things don't. So we make all these lies up because we can't cope with the thought of it not lasting. So this is why that's another lie on top of the attachment, you know. And that's the trouble. When the bubble bursts, you can't bear the thought of the good thing changing, so you fantasize it'll last forever. We say, finally, I found happiness, as if you've locked it in stone, you know. Finally, I found the job that's the best. And then suddenly everything goes wrong and you're devastated again because we don't realize impermanence. Now, the tragedy is when the bubble bursts and you go crashing down to despair. Now you can't see the light at the end of the tunnel because now you think the suffering will never change. That's why we kill ourselves. So there's making things as if they're lasting forever is a major mistake we make, you know. It's linked to attachment so strongly. Buddhist, I mean, all this analysis is this is the Buddhist analysis, and in a sense, we can hear it as common sense. He didn't make it up. He didn't make it up. He's observed this. It's observing the workings of the human mind, you know. And that's what we're trying to do to our own minds, observe all these stories in the head. And it gets ever more sophisticated as we get better and better at practice, you know. Are we communicating? Good. Yes, darling.
Kind of a second question.
Yeah.
You say when someone's in despair and
Yeah.
they can't see the light.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
Can you actually bring someone who's in that? Can you bring them to the light? Can you?
I understand. Yes. I think, okay, if you analyze it, if I'm in despair because Tom left me, my fantasy didn't sustain. So you crash, equal to the up is equal to the down. So you crash down to despair. And this is what the world calls bipolar. And I always joke, and I'm not joking, we are all bipolar. It's just a question of degree. It's attachment and aversion. That's all it is. And we're running between these 1,000 times a day. Just some of us are more extreme than others, that's all. So when you're feeling in despair, that's like the ultimate in self-loathing, the ultimate in I am worthless, the ultimate in that I'm nothing. So the main thing we can do for a person is to try and tell them that they're not like that, to love them, to show affection. That's the best you can do. You can't bully them. You can't force them to like themselves. You show love for them. You show they're worthwhile. You show them it's okay. And hopefully they will be able to take the nourishment of your love and help them nourish their own hearts and change. Some people can't. Some people just live in despair and depression, no matter how much love and affection they get. It's just set in stone, but that's the best you can do. There's no point in lecturing, just loving them, showing them affection, showing they are, counteracting their own view of being nothing, showing that there's something. Do you understand? I think, don't you think? Don't you agree?
Yeah. You
know yourself when you're full of despair or anger or hurt and someone perseveres with you and you know they love you, that's pretty powerful. Because especially when it's anger, and you get anger, because anger and pride, there's another whole one, anger and pride are like brothers, you know, or sisters, like cousins, like twins. I remember Atisha said, the best humility is patience. And he might have said, The best patience is humility, but it seems to be the same. So humility is a feeling of being content, and patience is a brave attitude of dealing with the problems without going crazy. Whereas anger is this, like you said, hurt. It's very true. As the eye has been hurt, injured very deeply, there's no question. That's why we lash out. So anger is this panic-stricken when bad things happen. And then it's also when it's added, and there has to be, when you're angry, there has to be a sense of like, who do you think you are? How dare you harm me? You know, there's pride and anger are very, very linked. You kind of hear me saying there's a vivid sense of your importance. And they're very, very linked. So when you've got low self-esteem, you've collapsed, that view has collapsed. You're nothing now. You're nothing. So to show someone they are something, but it's by being loving and patient, not by bullying them, not by giving them lectures, just showing love and kindness. And to know in your life is, you know, especially with anger, I know because anger was one of my main habits. And when I was little, it's very defensive. You feel very hurt and you push people away with anger. And I know there's a woman, a friend of mine years ago, who was the only one of the few people I knew who didn't get freaked out about my anger. She didn't get freaked out by it. So when a person's angry and proud, you're dying for a person to persevere and to show love, but you keep pushing them away. So you don't get, you know, if a person's pushing you away, you don't ignore it, but you do ignore it. And you keep showing this perseverance and kindness and love. And that, I think, is so important. Because when you're injured and hurt, especially if you're proud and arrogant and angry, you want to smash everybody, go away from me. Don't believe it. You're dying to be loved. A person who's angry is dying for a person to not believe in your anger and to cut past it. Do you understand me? Are we communicating? Because we get so fearful of other people's stuff. We're very nervous, you know. It's got to have wisdom to do that. This person I remember, the first person in my life who didn't respond to my anger, didn't kind of get nervous. She just stood there and was persevered and showed she loved me. This was very powerful for my mind. Do you understand me? Got to have courage and confidence in yourself to do that, because we're easily put off by other people's behavior and get nervous, you know. Do you understand? Yeah. What else, people? Yeah. Please don't talk to me.
I'm not quite sure how to formulate the question, so
Okay.
apologies if I go on. I'm thinking what you said there about going back to the complicated. She said we will be married.
We'll be together till we're 18.
How do you balance? What are your thoughts on sort of having that?
Yes. No, right, exactly. Good question.
And
Yep.
self-sabotage.
That's right. That's right. No, I know. Well, the thing is, there's nothing wrong with this. Is the thing we think, well, if I start to realize impermanence and that Tom could die today, then we think, well, why bother? Why not just sit back and go wait for Tom to leave me? That's nihilism. That's absurd. So there's nothing wrong with having a long-term plan. There's nothing wrong with planning to be together till you're 80. Nothing wrong with that. But things change. Unless you're clairvoyant, you don't know when it's going to change. So then, as long as you know, you live your life every second. This is why they say the best one to think about. I mean, okay, I remember one woman. The self-sabotage one is another second in a second. But there's one woman in a class. I remember she said she lived in panic the whole time that her husband would die. And I remember she said, "How do I live in the moment?" I said, "Well, forget about living in the moment." I said, "Just realize he will die." I mean, it's a fact. It's not, but we think that's sort of fatalistic. It's a fact he'll die. The only reason we can't think it is because we don't want him to die. So that's fine. Recognize you don't want him to die. But I said the best thing is realize he is impermanent. He will die, and you don't happen to know when. So when you realize that, you'll actually make the most of it, and you'll not waste a single second of today. And then if you wake up in the morning and he's still breathing and warm, it's a bonus. So when you realize everything is impermanent, I mean, if you go away for a 2-day, even just a weekend holiday to some gorgeous place, you don't say, why bother going? It's only 2 days. You actually make the most of it because it's only 2 days. But if you tend to think, oh, you know, everything has to last forever, you won't bother. So actually, it's being impermanent, knowing he could die today. It's not as if you're saying it every day. Oh, you haven't left me yet, Tom. Why haven't you left me? Or no, oh, yeah, this is self-sabotage. You should be leaving me because you're impermanent. No, it just becomes integrated inside you. You get to know everything changes, and then you live your life according, and you make the most of it. and you appreciate and you make the most of it when you realize it's impermanent. It becomes more integrated inside you. And then you would just, so the self-sabotage one is another whole discussion. So why don't you tell me about that one?
I know I've been doing a lot of work myself on sort of changing careers and thinking about future.
Yeah.
I've always been a bit hesitant to sort of put things out there.
What do you mean by that?
Like, okay, I want to do this, I can do this and talk. I've thought of planning things in my own head, but not sharing it out in the universe.
Okay.
So to speak. But a lot of things I've been reading and looking at, it's like to manifest things, to make it happen, to talk about that. So I would have in the past perhaps thought, if I put it out there as something I want, there's a risk it will not happen.
No, that's a very common one, isn't it? Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, so listen, this is the thing. I mean, the Buddhist view of karma is that, as Lama Zopa says, everything exists on the tip of the wish, the thought, I will. So even if you want to go have an ice cream, it's exactly the same whether you want to go make $100 million in a big new career or buy an ice cream. It's the same process. The first thought has to be, I want an ice cream. But our problem is we say, I want to make $100 million. I want to get married and have 5 children. I want to start a new business. I want to go learn Japanese. If, depending on the status quo now, we say that thought and then the next second is, no, not possible. Can't do it. Haven't got the money. No, I can't do it. We've got to train ourselves to know that the first step is to think I want it. And of course, it's got to be a valid want. You can also want to kill your father. That's not so cool. So have a valid thought and know that's the first step. As soon as you say, I want an ice cream, you're already moving in the direction of ice cream. You'll find the method, but you don't say, oh no, I can't have an ice cream. Then maybe the shop's closed, or maybe they haven't got chocolate, or maybe the traffic's too difficult, or maybe I'll get killed on the way. No, you've got to first know you want an ice cream. Then you see if it's possible, and you start doing the steps. It's a gradual process. And as soon as you say, if you don't say you want it, it won't come. You got to, and you don't have to put it out to the outside world. This can be your own internal process, darling. It's your mind that's powerful. You don't need to tell your sisters and your brothers, and they'll gossip about it, and then they could sabotage because they're being jealous. So you be careful who you talk to. But you having the plan yourself and you taking the steps, that's the main one. Do you see my point?
Thank you. Yes.
That's really important. Yeah. You got to, that's the one. I mean, let's say, Venerable Sarah rings me up and says, and I'm in the middle and I've got a husband and 7 children, and I'm living in Melbourne and I'm busy and I've got my life and overwhelmed by my dramas. And she says, oh, Robina, the Dalai Lama's going to teach in Paris next weekend, a very special teaching. Would you like to come? The first thing is, I think of my husband, my kids, my jobs. Oh no, not possible. Can't do that. I don't want to be disapproved of. I don't want to spend the money. And the first thing is I say, no, not possible. What I should say is, wow, what a good idea. You open your mind to it. That's the miracle. Then you see if it's possible. We cut ourselves up the knees first time by saying not possible. Say, yes, I would love that. That doesn't mean you're going to do it. I would love an ice cream, but maybe it's not possible. That's okay. But you can't just cut yourself off first. So you've got to say, yes, what a good idea. I'd love to go to Paris. Then you look into it and it might well happen. Or it not, but you've got to say, yes, I want it first. This is a really powerful point. Because we're afraid of upsetting people. We're afraid of not doing the right thing. We're afraid of being disapproved of. Do you understand? It's really important to say, yes, what a good idea. Want it first. Intention. I will. It's very powerful. What else, people? You make me talk for 2 whole hours in the morning. It's so long.
Very, very good.
Is it?
Yeah.
And she praises me to make me feel better.
Oh, not at all.
Okay, what else is there? Any other questions online? Wolfgang. Any questions from Wolfgang? I want Wolfgang. All right, that's fine. Wolfgang.
No, thank you. Thank you very much, Venerable Robina. Thank you.
Okay, good. All right. So what about Caroline? She never asked any questions. She just sits there smiling. Come on, girl. No questions. I'm not being rude, darling. Well, I probably am being rude. I'm always rude. And I say I'm not being. Who else is there? Kate, Namka, Stephanie, Katarina. There's Katarina, yeah. Okay, people, I mean, okay. This is the nitty-gritty of it. This is, and all I'm doing, these words, you see, it's interesting, isn't it? These words I'm saying, they sound reasonable, don't they? This is Buddhist psychology. I'm not trying to be sarcastic here. I'm speaking proper Buddhist analysis of the mind. So it shows it's not as if it's owned by the Buddha, but I'm just putting it with my Australian voice, putting it down to earth terms, And this is why it's so powerful. I mean, and this is what's interesting. You listen to this. Have you noticed when we're discussing our mind, this is the Buddhist view. It's quite interesting. You don't discuss the event. We mentioned your sister. We mentioned whoever it was. We mentioned whoever it was. But the job we're doing is working on our mind. And that's the powerful thing in our culture psychologically. I think we factor in the events and give them a very big role and have to understand the event and understand what mummy did and understand the sister. No, to know your own mind, you don't need to know your sister's mind. This for me is the revelation in the Buddhist approach. It's totally to do with your own mind. But we don't think of it that way in our culture because we factor in the events having the major role even. Do you understand? So in other words, I mean, it doesn't mean that what your mother and father did to you doesn't play a role. It is obvious it does. So if I look at my mind, you know, and see that I have a tendency to be angry, a tendency to be arrogant as a little girl. I can see those in my mind. I see them now, so I see them then. So when I look back in my life, using the Buddhist analysis, and remember the responses I had to certain things that happened, my mother, my father, the Catholic nuns, whatever, that can be a good trigger. But the bottom line is you have to learn about my mind. So the reason I could say, well, I suffered because my father got angry with me. I could say that. But the better one to say is, I got angry because anger was my tendency. And if I've got the view of karma, I created the cause to have that father. But forget even that one. If I can look into my mind as a child, if I look into my pride, one of my sufferings in my life was I didn't feel I was approved of. People got easily upset by me. People thought I was angry. I got defensive and poor me, you know. If I look at the anger and the pride and all those different qualities, that explains myself to me, and that's enough. Then I can understand how I responded in that way. Because I mean, so the event isn't helpful to see, but the West, we give the main emphasis on the event. And that then tells us, now I know why I'm angry and I'm allowed to be angry because look what my father did to me. We tend to want to get off the hook. But the Buddhist one, it seems more brutal, but it's simply getting us to own whatever our own tendencies are and that we can change them. That for me, I find so tasty. Do you understand what I'm saying? Do you understand or not? You look like you've got doubts.
Me?
Yeah. No?
No, I'm expecting.
Okay, good. All right. I mean, it feels to us like it's blame initially. Like if you have a child who's abused by the father, and you try and you look at the child and you're trying to help this child, and then she's in the old, you know, the orphan's home because of whatever happened. And then the first thing when we try to, okay, well, I think in our analysis in the modern psychology, you see a kid misbehaving. Let's say misbehaving. So the first thing we think to do is, what is their mother like? What's their father like? What's their home like? But the Buddhist one is, you actually don't need to do that. You can see they're very angry, and then you can deduce from the ease of their anger that they've had a very difficult situation. That's why their anger is so violent, isn't it? You can see their mind. That's the key, to see their mind, and then you know how to help them. You don't need to ask them what their mother did and what their father did. You couldn't learn if you like, but the mind, we don't have that view of the mind, I don't think, in modern psychology. The Buddhist view is so profound in its analysis of the different states of mind. And that's our main job. Are we communicating, people? There's a bunch of negative ones and there's a bunch of positive ones. It's almost too simple in a way. It almost seems too simplistic. And the more you know these, and then actually you dig deep and you unpack and you unpack and unpack and unpack, ever more subtle, layers and layers and layers and layers of anger, layers and layers and layers and layers of attachment. They get ever more subtle, ever more nuanced as you keep working on your mind, as you get more and more familiar with the workings of your own mind. This is the job in Buddhism. Until the point you've got single point of concentration and you can unpack and unravel to the point where you finally can argue with the misconceptions and eventually literally remove them from your mind. It's a process, though, of untangling, unraveling. This is the Buddha's point. These neurotic states of mind have no basis in reality, therefore they can be removed. I mean, it's a radical point. So knowing your own mind is the key. Being your own therapist, like Nami Yesi said. Hearing the scripts, the attachment, anger, jealousy, low self-esteem, arrogance, this one, that one. There's only so many names for the different stories, and we have to hear them precisely, ever more precisely, ever more precisely. And then, of course, you have to know the virtues as well, and what their story is, what their function is. This is being a Buddhist. I want to stop now. Can I please stop now?
Yes. Very good timing, excellent.
Good.
We're right on the.
On the money. Oh, 10, it's true, it's 12 o'clock.
Right.
Okay, go people, have some lunch if you'd like. Have some lunch and watch your mind at the same time. Okay. Observe your attachment, observe your aversion if you get the wrong color peas or something. Oh, I don't like those peas, I want those peas. Notice your mind. Okay, so think of your lunch as delicious nectar and all the people who worked for it, the creatures who died, even if you're not going to eat meat, all the creatures who died for the veggies and everything. You think of these sentient beings. You think, I'm going to eat to be fat and healthy so I can continue to work on myself and benefit sentient beings. Repay their kindness. That's it, sweetie pies. See you soon. Hour and a half is necessary, or hour is good?
Whatever you'd like to say.
How were you here yesterday? Was an hour and a half too long? Nice.
So we're going to 4, so that's.
Good, okay,
just
good,
2.5
okay.
hours.
Enjoy your lunch and have a chat about this as you're having your lunch as well. Thank you, precious people. See you all soon. Thank you, darlings.